After losing his wife, Daniel moves through each day like a man carrying a silent storm inside his chest, pretending to stay strong for his little daughter while his heart trembles with memories he can't escape. He believes he must face the world alone, unaware that Emily's best friend, Lena, is watching from a distance, torn between keeping her promise and protecting her own fragile emotions. She knows the truth. He doesn't. That Emily's last request wasn't just a whisper of love, but a final thread tying their lives together. And now, as Thanksgiving approaches, their paths are pulled toward a moment neither of them is ready for. Daniel senses something shifting around him, something he can't quite explain, while Lena feels the weight of a choice that could either heal their broken family or shatter what remains. Destiny is already moving toward their doorstep, and none of them can stop it. Daniel moves through life with a quiet heaviness that never leaves his shoulders, waking up each morning to the same empty silence that filled the house the day Emily took her last breath. He tries to focus on work, tries to smile for Mia, but every step feels like walking through memories that refuse to fade. The living room still holds Emily's favorite blanket, the hallway still echoes with her laughter, and the kitchen still carries the warmth she once brought into every corner. Daniel pretends he is fine, but the tired look in his eyes tells a different story, one that Mia notices, even though she is too young to understand grief the way he does. She watches him struggle, watches him drift in and out of thoughts he never speaks about. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel senses that something in his life is about to change, though he doesn't know how or when. Daniel stood in the dim hallway, his hand resting on the doorframe as if the wood itself could steady him, unaware that far away Lena sat alone with the same uneasy heaviness in her chest, the same silence wrapping around her like a memory she couldn't let go. She had opened Emily's old message thread again, scrolling through every voice note and picture until she reached the one recording she had avoided for months. One Emily had made just weeks before the end. Lena pressed play, and Emily's soft, fading voice filled the room, trembling but full of love as she whispered the words that had become a promise etched into Lena's heart. Watch over them. Don't let them face the world alone. Those simple words had felt sacred back then, like a final gift from a friend she cherished more than anyone. Yet now they felt overwhelming, dangerous, and heartbreakingly close to something she wasn't. Sure, she had the right to feel. She wiped her eyes and stood up, passing slowly, battling the fear that had been tightening around her for months. She wanted to help Daniel and Mia, wanted to bring warmth back into their quiet world, but every step toward them felt like stepping onto thin ice, where one wrong move could make everything collapse. She feared crossing boundaries Emily never intended her to cross, feared creating confusion, feared stirring emotions Daniel might not be ready to face. Yet at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that avoiding them was hurting them more, especially Mia, whose laughter had lost its brightness since Emily's passing. Lena remembered the last time she saw Daniel at the grocery store, standing by the produce section with exhaustion written all over his face, while Mia tugged at his hand, asking innocent questions he barely seemed to hear. He had offered her a small, polite smile, the kind of smile people use when they're trying not to fall apart in public. And something inside Lena had tightened so painfully she had walked away before she did anything foolish. But the guilt never left her. She spent countless nights wondering whether her distance was making Daniel believe she didn't care, whether Mia thought she had disappeared like everyone else who had quietly stepped back after the funeral. Lena felt torn between the risk of stepping in and the regret of staying away, her heart pulled in two directions by fear and loyalty. And now, with Thanksgiving approaching, Emily's words felt louder than ever, echoing in her mind whenever she closed her eyes, urging her to do something she still wasn't brave enough to do. She imagined Daniel sitting at the dinner table with empty chairs and unfinished conversations haunting the air. Imagined Mia asking questions he didn't know how to answer. Imagined the silent ache that must settle over them every holiday. That thought alone made her chest tighten until she couldn't sit still. She picked up a jacket, hesitated, then put it down again, running her fingers through her hair as Dal clawed at her. What if her presence reminded Daniel of everything? Ad. Lost. What if he thought she was trying to replace someone irreplaceable? What if stepping closer opened emotions he had spent months trying to bury? But another part of her whispered that Emily had trusted her for a reason. had chosen her because she knew Lena's love for their family wasn't temporary or shallow, but rooted in years of shared memories, laughter, and quiet conversations about dreams none of them ever imagined would be cut short. With trembling hands, Lena picked up the framed picture of the three of them from her shelf, Emily smiling with her arm around her, Daniel in the background holding Mia on his shoulders, sunlight pouring over their happy faces. For a moment, Lena felt the room spin, felt the weight of everything she had lost and everything she was terrified of losing again. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to steady the storm inside her. Her promise wasn't just a string of words. It was the last piece of Emily she still carried, the last responsibility she hadn't fulfilled. And somewhere inside her, beneath all the fear and uncertainty, she felt a quiet pull drawing her toward Daniel and Mia, a feeling she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. She knew she couldn't stay on the sidelines forever. Something in her heart whispered that the moment she had been avoiding was coming closer, pulled forward by destiny, grief, and love that had never belonged only to the past. And as she stood there, trembling, Lena realized that keeping Emily's promise might be the only way to bring light back into all their lives, even if it meant stepping into a future she wasn't ready to face. Lena held the picture close for a long moment before setting it down, her heart trembling with a strange mix of fear and determination, unaware that at the same time Mia sat on the living room floor miles away, clutching crayons and a construction paper card she had been working on in secret, her small hands moving with excitement as she wrote Lena's name across the front in bright colors. Mia had missed Lena in a way she couldn't explain, in a way that made her believe her mother would want Lena near them during a holiday that always felt warm when Emily was alive. She didn't ask Daniel because she sensed he might say no, not out of anger, but out of the quiet sadness that made him hesitate to invite anyone into their fragile world. Instead, she quietly folded the card and slipped it into her school backpack, waiting for the perfect moment to give it to Lena herself. The next afternoon, when Lena arrived at Mia's school to drop off donated books, Mia ran into her arms with pure joy, handing her the little handmade card without a word. Lena opened it, and inside Mia had written, "Will you come for Thanksgiving? Please. Daddy doesn't know. It can be our secret." The innocence of the request stole Lena's breath, leaving her frozen as Mia looked up with hopeful eyes that made it impossible to refuse. Lena knew this invitation wasn't just about a holiday. It was a child's attempt to fill an empty space that had grown too large. Her voice shook as she promised she would come, even though her heart raced with uncertainty. When Thanksgiving morning arrived, Daniel was in the kitchen trying to focus on a simple meal, something small enough to avoid the memories that always came with holidays. He didn't expect guests, didn't want to face the awkward sympathy of neighbors, and certainly didn't expect a knock at the door just as he placed a dish on the counter. Mia raced to the entrance before he could stop her, swinging the door open with a burst of excitement that startled him. And there stood Lena, holding a warm casserole dish wrapped in towels, her smile gentle, unsure, and filled with a tenderness that made Daniel's breath catch. For a moment, the air felt suspended, as if time itself had paused to see what he would do. He stared at her with surprise and confusion, wondering if he had forgotten something or if this was just a kind gesture she decided to make without warning. But then he saw the way Mia clung to Lena's hand and realized this wasn't spontaneous at all. Lena stepped inside slowly, offering the dish with a quiet sincerity that made Daniel feel both grateful and unsettled. He thanked her with a soft voice, trying to hide the storm of emotions rising inside him. Emotions he hadn't prepared to face today. They moved to the kitchen together, speaking carefully, each sentence weighed with unspoken thoughts. Danya noticed the way Lena's presence changed the atmosphere in the house, how her warmth spread through the rooms just like Emily's once, had Jack creating a feeling he didn't know how to welcome or reject. Mia hummed happily as she helped Lena set the table. Unaware of the delicate silence hanging between the adults, Daniel watched them, his chest tightening with a mixture of sorrow and hope, sensing that something important was unfolding right in front of him. Meanwhile, Lena felt every small glance he gave her, every hesitant smile, every pause in his voice, and it made her heart beat faster with uncertainty she tried to hide. She didn't know if she had made the right decision, didn't know if crossing that doorway meant fulfilling Emily's promise or risking emotions none of them were ready to face. But as Mia's laughter filled the room for the first time in months, with a brightness that felt almost magical. Both Daniel and Lena realized that this unexpected invitation wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of something they could neither predict nor stop a silent shit, pulling their lives closer in ways they would soon be unable to deny. Lena followed Mia into the kitchen, her eyes tracing the soft glow of the afternoon light that settled over the counters. And as Daniel moved around quietly, she began to notice the delicate details that revealed how deeply Emily's presence still lived inside this house. A framed photo of Emily holding a newborn Mia sat near the spice rack, untouched and slightly tilted, as if someone wiped around it but never dared to move it. A floral apron hung on the hook by the fridge, its faded fabric holding memories of family dinners and warm laughter that seemed to echo faintly in the stillness. Lena felt her heart tighten as she realized Daniel hadn't changed anything. Not because he wanted to freeze time, but because letting go felt like losing pieces of her all over again. Daniel sensed her noticing, and for a brief second their eyes met, creating a quiet understanding he didn't know how to put into words. He turned away quickly, gripping the edge of the counter with subtle tension, trying to steady himself before the wave of emotion growing inside him could break through. Mia, completely unaware of the fragile storm unfolding between them, pulled Lena toward the cutting board with bright excitement, asking her to help slice vegetables the way Emily once taught them. Lena forced a gentle smile, stepping into the moment despite the ache forming in her chest. And as she began chopping, Daniel's voice joined hers in small instructions that felt strangely comforting. The kitchen slowly filled with a rhythm they hadn't shared in years, a quiet blend of familiar sounds that softened the air around them. Daniel watched Lena laugh at Mia's tiny jokes, watched her guide Mia's hands safely while slicing, and the sight made something inside him unravel, something he had been trying to keep buried under responsibilities and silence. He wasn't ready for how natural it felt having her here, how her presence eased the loneliness he thought would never fade. Yet part of him felt guilty, as if allowing warmth into his home again meant erasing the traces of a woman he still loved deeply. Lena, sensing the shift in his posture, moved carefully, trying not to disturb the emotional balance that seemed to sway with every shared glance. She walked to the sink to wash the vegetables, and from there her eyes fell on a small wooden box. On the shelf above, the same box Emily once used to store recipe cards and little notes from Daniel during their early years together. The sight sent a sharp pull through her heart, reminding her of all the afternoons she spent in this kitchen with Emily, laughing about burnt pies and secret ingredients. She swallowed hard, wiping her hands slowly, and forced herself to stay present, knowing the memories could drown her if she let them. Mia tugged on Daniel's sleeve, then asking him to help her reach the plates. And as he lifted her with a soft chuckle, Lena felt a fragile warmth fill the room, a warmth she hadn't felt since before Emily's illness. The three of them moved, together with a quiet harmony that felt almost unreal, almost like the house itself was taking a deep breath after holding so much sorrow for so long. When Lena set the table, Daniel joined her without hesitation, placing forks beside the plates with shaking hands. He hoped she wouldn't notice. She did notice, but she didn't comment. Instead, she gave him a small, understanding smile that made his chest feel tight. There was no spoken acknowledgement of the tension between them, no mention of the past pressing against their thoughts. But the silence carried emotions none of them dared to voice. As they finished the preparations, a soft laughter escaped Mia. When she spilled a bit of salt on the table, and both Daniel and Lena instinctively reached to wipe it at the same time, their hands brushing for the briefest moment. The contact sent a sudden warmth through Daniel's arm, a warmth he hadn't felt in so long he almost stepped back out of instinct. But he forced himself to stay still, to breathe, to accept the gentle connection instead of running from it. Lena felt it too, the subtle electricity of a boundary shifting without words. And she pulled her hand back slowly, unsure whether to apologize or pretend it meant nothing. The moment lingered silently between them as Mia continued humming her innocent tune. And while none of them spoke about it, the house seemed to hold the truth clearly. For the first time in a long while, a fragile light had returned to their world, flickering softly between the memories that still lived here and the new emotions quietly forming in the spaces those memories once filled. Mia skipped away from the table, humming softly, her tiny feet tapping against the wooden floor as Daniel and Lena finished placing the last dishes down. And before either of them noticed, She wandered toward the hallway cabinet where Emily once kept small holiday decorations. She tugged the drawer open, searching for the old turkey-shaped candle she loved. But instead her fingers brushed against a thin envelope tucked beneath a folded tablecloth, its edges slightly yellowed and a soft label written in Emily's handwriting reading "For Thanksgiving." Curiosity sparked instantly, and Mia pulled it out with gentle care, sensing without understanding that this envelope was different from anything she had ever found before. She hurried back toward the warm light of the dining room, clutching the envelope close to her chest, and when Daniel saw it in her hands, his breath caught, a strange tension tightening around him as he recognized Emily's careful script. He froze, unsure whether to reach for it or tell Mia to put it away. But before he spoke, Mia held it out toward him with innocent excitement, whispering that it had been hiding in the drawer like a secret treasure. Daniel's hands trembled as he took it, his heartbeat echoing louder in his ears, and Lena stood still beside him, watching with a quiet dread she couldn't explain, sensing that whatever was inside had been waiting for this exact moment. The room fell silent as Daniel carefully slid a finger under the seal, unfolding the thin paper inside, and Emily's familiar handwriting spread across the page, soft and steady, filled with the warmth of someone who loved deeply even in her final days. His eyes skimmed the first lines, but the moment her words became clear, his breath broke, and Lena felt her own chest tighten as she stepped closer, unsure whether she should leave or stay. Emily's letter began by thanking Lena for being her truest friend, for holding her hand through the darkest hours, and for loving Mia with a heart that had never faltered. She wrote about memories they had shared, the laughter they created, and the trust she carried until the end. Then the words shifted, turning toward Daniel, telling him how much she trusted his strength, how deeply she believed in his ability to protect their daughter even when the world felt unbearable. And then came the part that made Daniel, his vision blur, the part that made Lena press a hand against her mouth to keep from gasping. Emily wrote that she wanted Lena to remain close to them, not to replace her, not to fill a role that could never be filled, but to stand beside them as a guardian of their happiness, a steady presence to guide them through pain, to bring warmth back into their lives, and to make sure neither Daniel nor Mia carried their sorrow alone. She wrote that love does not disappear when life ends, that it transforms, shifts, and finds new ways to protect the people left behind. Her final lines were soft but powerful, urging Daniel to trust Lena the way Emily always had, assuring him that letting someone in again was not betrayal but healing, and reminding him that she wanted their home to remain a place of laughter, not a museum of memories. Daniel's hands shook so violently he nearly dropped the letter, and Lena stepped forward instinctively, steadying his arm with trembling fingers that felt the weight of Emily's words like a gentle but overwhelming embrace. Neither of them spoke, unable to form sentences around the emotions pressing at their chests, and Mia watched them with wide eyes, sensing the importance of the moment, even if she couldn't understand the depth behind it. Daniel looked at Lena, then truly looked at her, seeing not just Emily's friend, but a woman who had carried a promise in silence, a woman Emily had trusted with a piece of her heart. Lena's eyes filled with tears she didn't wipe away, and for the first time, neither of them stepped back from the feeling growing quietly between them. The letter remained open in Daniel's hand, its final words drifting through the room, like a whisper from the past, binding their lives together in a way none of them had expected, but all of them suddenly understood. Emily had planned long before this day arrived. Daniel stood frozen with the letter still trembling between his fingers, its final words echoing through the quiet room like a voice returning from a place he had never been able to reach. His breath shuddered as he lowered the paper, and when he finally looked at Lena, there was no way to hide the storm breaking inside him. She waited without moving, afraid even a single step might shatter whatever fragile truth had just surfaced. Mia wandered toward the living room with her card, giving them silent space neither of them had asked for but desperately needed. The moment the child disappeared around the corner, Daniel exhaled a breath he had been holding for months, a breath filled with grief he had buried so deep he feared it would drown him if it ever surfaced again. His voice, when it finally escaped, was raw and unsteady as he admitted he had been lost since the moment Emily slipped away, wandering through days that felt hollow, trying to be strong but feeling emptier each time he walked past the things she left behind. He confessed he had built walls around himself, not to keep others out, but to keep his own heart from collapsing. As he spoke, Lena felt each word dig into her chest, because she had seen that emptiness in his eyes long before he ever acknowledged it. Daniel continued, explaining that her presence in the house tonight had done something he didn't expect, something he didn't understand, but couldn't deny. He told her that the silence felt softer, the air felt warmer, and for the first time since Emily's passing, their home felt alive, as if someone had opened a window in a room sealed for too long. He confessed that it frightened him, how much peace her presence brought, because he didn't know if he was allowed to feel anything that resembled comfort after losing someone he loved so deeply. His voice cracked when he admitted that part of him feared Emily would think he was letting go of her memory, but the letter he held in his hand had broken through that fear, revealing a truth he had avoided facing. Lena swallowed hard as she listened, her hands trembling at her sides, and when she finally gathered the strength to speak, her words came out soft, but filled with years of emotions she had tried to bury. She told him she had cared for their family long before Emily grew ill, cared in a way that went beyond friendship but never crossed any line because she respected their love too deeply to even think of interfering. She explained that after Emily passed, she stayed away because she feared her presence might cause pain, feared he would misunderstand her intentions, or worse, believe she was trying to step into a space that didn't belong to her. Her voice shook as she admitted she had spent countless nights replaying every moment of the past, wondering whether helping him would honor Emily's trust or betray it. She confessed that she missed Mia terribly, missed the house that once felt like a second home, missed the warmth of a friendship that had shaped so much of her life, but she never wanted to disrespect the memory of a woman she loved like a sister. Daniel's expression softened as he listened, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes as her honesty reached him more deeply than he expected. Lena continued, telling him that the letter was not just a message from the past but permission she never knew she needed, a reminder that Emily had always seen the bond they all shared and trusted it enough to carry forward even after she was gone. She confessed she didn't know where any of this would lead or what it meant, but she knew she would never have stepped through his door if her intentions weren't pure. Daniel took a step closer then, his voice barely above a whisper as he thanked her for caring, for loving Mia, for honoring Emily's memory with a loyalty that had never wavered, and for carrying a promise that had weighed heavily on her shoulders. The distance between them felt charged with unspoken emotions, the kind that hovered gently, unsure whether to bloom or retreat. And as they stood in the warm glow of the dining room, surrounded by memories and possibility, both of them realized that the letter had not only broken the walls Daniel built, but had opened a fragile door toward healing neither of them had dared to imagine. Daniel guided Lena toward the table where Mia waited with a glow in her eyes he had not seen in months, and as he sat down he reached for Mia's small hand with one side and Lena's trembling fingers with the other, creating a quiet circle that felt fragile, yet undeniably whole. The air shifted softly, as if the house itself exhaled after holding its breath for far too long, and in that moment, the weight that had lived in every corner slowly lifted, leaving behind a gentle warmth neither of them could explain. They ate in peaceful silence, each heartbeat carrying the echo of Emily's love, each glance holding a promise. None of them dared to speak, yet all of them understood, and as the candle flickered against the fading light, it became clear that this Thanksgiving was not an ending to their grief, but the beginning of a healing Emily had hoped for, a new chapter waiting quietly to unfold.